But I'm going to start off by addressing a lot of the concerns primarily on social media. And I'm going to start off by really having empathy for the family, starting with the mother. And the mother's grieving. And right now she has a lot of frustration for law enforcement, the prosecutor's office, as to why her son's case has not moved forward. And she gets to grieve. You know, when we talk about legal hurdles that we have to encounter in law enforcement and from a prosecution standpoint, no grieving parent wants to hear that. They want answers and they want justice for their child. My job today is to give you the facts of the case and then a plea I'm going to have for those who are out there that can help us move this case forward. So my day started out talking to some of the family of Tyler. I did reach out to the mother. Unfortunately, there was no answer because I didn't want to have a press conference and then the family find out about it through television. And so I called an auntie. She resides in Alabama. I did have opportunity to speak with her about the status of the case, answer a lot of her questions. I also called two close friends of the family and had a very similar conversation with them. And those conversations went well. I appreciate them for calling me, number one, because I do understand there's a call for action for the Southfield Police Department to call the chief's office and demand justice for Tyler. And again, we accept that. I'm going to say it again, we accept that. The family gets to want to know answers. But again, I'm going to provide some facts and then give you more information. So a couple of things that I talked about with the family, because I wanted to address some of their concerns right off the bat. One question was when we initially made an arrest at the hotel of one of the teens, at that time a 15-year-old teen, who was in possession of 2 handguns, was a gunshot residue test performed. And so I had to advise the family that gunshot residue tests were popular in the 90s, early 2000s, but they're now inadmissible. The reason for that is because individuals who had that test performed on them, there was a number of false positives leading to false convictions. So law enforcement is no longer able to use gunshot residue testing. The other question I received is, well, Chief, why hasn't the police department made a charge in this case? And so I had to explain to them the police department, regardless of what agency, police departments do not issue charges. We gather the facts and then we present a case to the prosecutor's office for a charging decision. And they alone will make a determination, is there enough evidence to move forward with criminal prosecution? And so I'm going to start off with a reminder to those who may just be joining us or relatively new to what's going on. And this incident did occur on Sunday, February 11th at approximately 8:40 a.m. At the Westin Hotel here in Southfield, where Southfield officers were called to the hotel based on a call that a teen had been shot. When we arrived, we were able to detain 2 teens that were attempting to flee from the hotel room. One, again, holding 2 weapons. Further evidence did reveal that one of the weapons is the one that fatally shot Tyler. The other weapon, obviously not involved. The other teen, at that time, had no weapons on him. He was returned to his parents. The investigation continued, though, because we learned that there were 5 teens who were in this room. At the time, yes, they were unsupervised when this tragedy unfolded. And so a lot of evidence had to be recovered. Witnesses had to be interviewed. We started off our investigation by using the hotel room as our platform. We were able to gather video evidence in the hotel lobby that the kids earlier that morning had breakfast. There's also video of them in the hallways. But I'll remind you, there's no video inside a privacy of a hotel room, and then that's where the crime occurred, inside of the privacy of a hotel room. We continued our investigation, and we did search warrants on the cell phones that were collected. And what we were looking for is there a possibility that there would be video evidence that would have captured the shooting? So when we looked at the cell phones, there was no evidence that would support that evidence had been captured of the shooting. What we did discover is multiple photos of the teens at the hotel, some of which they were handling weapons. And the reason that's important is because we have 4 witnesses to this senseless crime. And at this time, none of them have come forward to give us an understanding of what transpired. We have physical evidence, we have circumstantial evidence. What we need is an eyewitness to bring those things together. So when we presented this case to the Oakland County Prosecutor's Office, that is the first thing that they noted for us, is that the witnesses have to come forward, mainly because although we apprehended an individual handling 2 of those weapons, we need evidence that would determine who was handling the weapon at the time that it was discharged, and also why the gun was discharged. So your next question is, well, what's happening with the kids? So again, all of them, through their parents, have obtained lawyers. When you're talking about prosecuting juveniles or even interviewing juveniles, there's laws associated with that. It's not that simple. Juveniles first have to be interviewed in the company of their parent, and juveniles also have the ability to have legal representation. We start with the parents first. Out of the 4 witnesses that we were able to identify, one of the parents did come to the station initially to speak with our detectives about the status of the investigation. But what I would tell you, when the question was posed to that young man about what transpired, the parent stopped the interview and said he needs a break, and that she will return with her child at a later date. When we reached back out, that parent also advised us that she too has obtained an attorney. So right now we need these parents, these juveniles who were there, his friends, to have the courage to give the family justice. You got to ask yourself that same question that the mother asked at her press conference. If this was you, you would want someone to step up. It takes courage to step up, but we need evidence. You know, the main reason for calling this press conference is because of perceptions of what law enforcement can and can't do. We have an idea who did it. Absolutely. There was even some hearsay evidence that we had our hands on. Hearsay evidence. But as you all know, hearsay evidence is not admissible in court. And I can even share with you the contents of that. But I will tell you, it leads us to knowing who our suspect is. I can't share that with you because there's not a charge at this time. But to move this case forward, there are 4 people who witnessed this. I need at least one of the 4 to have the courage to come forward and give us the information that we need. And so with that, I'm going to open up the floor for questions. Certainly if questions for me or the prosecutor's office, and we can dive into that. Yes, ma'am.
That night when it happened, all 4 witnesses, did you interview them, all 4 in that room?
So no. So the initial response, we were able to detain the one that was in possession of 2 weapons. He immediately sought legal assistance, legal counsel, and did not speak with us. And then the other juvenile that we had on scene that day, again, we have to coordinate through the parents. And so that parent prohibited that witness from speaking to us as well. And then through great detective work, because again, the other 2 witnesses had fled, we were able to track them down based on our investigation and attempt to interview them as well. But as I said earlier in my remarks, their parents secured attorneys and would not allow them to serve as witnesses for the Southfield Police Department.
Chief, why do you think they've circled the wagons, if you will, as far as, you know, if you knew that, you probably wouldn't be here, and I appreciate that. But, you know, if they know, might have been accidental, etc., why do you think it seems, I'm a novice, but it seems very unusual a year later that nobody has talked?
Well, I'm just as baffled as you are. You're talking about these are close friends. From my understanding, they spent a lot of time together. Certainly, different hotel rooms or hanging out they're part of their routine. They were very close friends. In fact, from my understanding, the families were associated through friendship. And so, for the parents, the teens who could lead us to knowledge about what transpired to not talk, again, I'm just as baffled as you. You know, some folks may lend to a system of folks not wanting to get involved. There's some theories that some of them may not want to serve this word I hate to even use, snitch. And some may theorize that some may be afraid to come forward. Because again, they're all friends. And who's going to have the courage to step up and say, hey, this is what happened, and give us that information. But we have to have that information. And I get it. The family's upset. The community's upset. I got a bunch of voicemails in my office right now from people upset. But the goal today is to give you the facts. We're ready to go as a police department. What I would tell you for certainty, because I know it was a concern that maybe the police department is protecting. Let me say one thing about this agency and one thing about this police chief. We don't protect anyone, but the public, safety. Someone who's involved or have knowledge of information, we're not going to protect them. So I have to reject that argument. We want this case closed. This is a shared frustration between the prosecutor's office, the police department, and what I'll tell you about these detectives, a lot of work went into even getting us to where we're at to be, as I use that word, ready to go. One of these kids step up, we can move this case towards a prosecution or however it moves forward. Again, we don't know the circumstances, but based on information that we gather, we'll at least be able to go to whatever the next steps are in this case.
Chief, a couple of clarifying questions. Was Tyler shot in a hotel room? Was it in one of the rooms?
Yes, he was shot inside of a hotel room.
And you're saying there were 4 other of what you guys think are his close friends with him at the time?
Yes, sir.
And then my last follow-up is, do we know who this unsupervised person was that was with the kids at the time?
Yes, so we do know the identity of the person who rented the room.
Has that person been spoken to?
That person also got a lawyer, and the same scenario transpires. Because even in that case, we have to prove knowledge of contributing to delinquency of a minor. So these are legal terms that, and I know social media and folks that don't really understand all this will have an opinion that the Southfield Police Department can do all these things, but there's guidelines, there's laws, there's procedures that we have to abide by. Otherwise, the case gets thrown away if we present a case without the correct information. So we're going to continue, despite any scrutiny, we're going to continue to do things ethically. We're going to continue to plead to these kids and these parents. That's where the focus should be. Certainly, I'll stand here, and I told you before, I'll absorb, because I lead this great organization, I will absorb the scrutiny. But the facts are, we're ready, but we have to have an eyewitness to this crime, and there are 4 of them, to come forward and give us what we need. Yes, sir.
If you don't, Chief, I mean, what's next? I understand the pleas, but I mean, it's tough. What's supposed to come after this if none of these teenagers or gentlemen come forward?
Well, I always answer questions by the word of the law. What can we do? So, right now, as I mentioned, these young men are juveniles and minors. When they turn 18, now they're legally an adult. So we will attempt to reach out to them as they're adults to see if they would be willing to provide information, because now they're not legally under the guidance of their parents. Certainly, if they still retain attorneys, when they right back where we started from. But to answer your question, I also shared that question. It was the same question some of the friends and family I spoke with this morning asked me, and that was my answer. We're going to at least try Because maybe out of 4 eyewitnesses, maybe one of them wants to talk, but maybe the parent isn't allowing him to talk. So that'll be the hope that I will have, and I will direct our detectives to move in that direction.
Speaking with Tyler's mother, there has been lack of communication, she says, with police to her. Would there be a reason for that?
Yes, and let's just say this is very difficult for the mother. You know, oftentimes when detectives, or even when I spoke to her earlier in the investigation, a lot of frustration. You know, she wants answers. Anything short of answers, she would get upset, you know, understandably. And so the detective did advise the family, to include the mother, that any developments on the case, we would continue to advise her. But as you know, there's been no developments because of a lack of cooperation. But yes, we could always do better, just to continue to reach out. I know the detectives have spoken to some of the family members from time to time, but we can always do better as keeping the line of communication open. But the unfortunate part is it continues to be frustrating for a grieving mother when the case isn't moving forward, and then trying to explain legal hurdles, which, and I'll be honest with you, I'll probably be the same way.
Chief,
I had a brother in 2007 murdered in Detroit. Case never solved. Why? Because his friends failed him. So I can relate to friends not providing information. Yes, sir.
I'm sorry, Chief. I just wanted to ask, for those of us who don't know, is the clock ticking? I mean, is there a certain time where you won't be able to charge anybody in this crime? I mean, you know, we watch TV and see there's no statute of limitations on murder and things like that, but I mean, is that true, or, you know?
Yes, for homicides, there is no statute of limitations. We can always, at any time, reopen a case. That's why you have cold case detectives in police departments. So yes, homicides is open for a prosecution whenever evidence is presented. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, Chief. So what happens, or what could you give to the cameras right now, to anyone that's listening, of a child that wants to come forward? What kind of protection or comfort could you give that child and their family as far as protection?
I think it's a great question. I think right now we, in a world where people can be fearful of coming forward. But I have to just remind you, it will take courage. You know, certainly, you know, Southfield Police Department, or if you don't live in Southfield, the home of residents, certainly we can reach out to those agencies to, you know, give some type of attention to you. Certainly call 911, but it will take some courage. I want to be very, you know, honest. I'm not going to stand up here and just, you know, give you these buzzwords. It takes courage to come forward in a case, because remember, somebody has to, if it goes to trial, somebody has to sit in that chair and tell the judge and or jury what they know. It takes courage. And so I just hope that someone, again, 4 witnesses, at least one of them have that courage to give this family closure.
And what would you say also about the culture of, you know, not snitching and the impact that it has on cases like this? Because a lot of them do go cold.
Yeah, it's terrible, you know, that culture, you know. I think ground has been made, you know, leading the police department, you do see a courageous part of society. This case, obviously, no cooperation, but we've had other cases where good witnesses come forward and go through the judicial process. And so, again, I just have to encourage individuals to do the right thing, because, again, if it was you or your family, you would be just as upset as Tyler's mother is if you could have come forward and you didn't.
Can you clarify a couple things for me? My memory may be gray, but I thought it was one of the parents that rented the room. Are you able to clarify who rented the room for them?
Yeah, it was a uncle of one of the young men.
And in regard to questioning them, can you, on a timeline, say when the last time was you were able to sit down with them, with lawyers, parents present? How long has it been since you've been able to talk to any of them directly?
Yeah, the latest contact was early on. You know, this happened on February 11th. So within that initial month time frame was our main focus on getting interviews scheduled. So between the time of incident and, let's say, middle of March, After that, the conversations, as far as them assisting us or even scheduling interviews, they all obtained lawyers and refused to cooperate.
Do you consider this a homicide, or do you consider this an accidental shooting, or have you held off clarifying what you think it is?
Well, I want to be careful, with my words in this type of platform about what I personally think. I just know at this point a gun discharged inside of the hotel room. Somebody was handling that weapon, and I want to know what happened. So I'll reserve my opinions. But again, someone died, and we need to know what transpired.
Not to monopolize, I had two more. Was the gun legally owned? And if so, if you know by whom, and can there be an avenue to, I know gun laws have changed since this incident, but in regard to proper ownership and protocol of handling weapons, I'm not a gun owner, but is there any avenue as to who had this gun, who owned it, and the recklessness involved of leaving it with teens?
Yeah, so the gun was reported stolen. I believe, don't quote me at this point, but I believe out of, I'll just say a local city. So there's no knowledge of how this team got in possession of that weapon.
Got it.
So at this point, we don't know.